Hello everybody, this is the King of Pikmin here yet again, and we finally beat Elden Ring, as I'm sure you know. Those of you who watched my playthrough will have seen that starting at like episode 30 or so and on, I became a lot more irritable and whatnot. And that's the reason I wanted to make this video, is because I wanted to clear the air a little bit about the game, especially towards the back half of my playthrough. I seem to be hating on it a lot. So before I continue any further, let me say that the game truly does deserve all the praise and recognition that it's getting, because it is one of a kind. FromSoft successfully took the formula that they had and turned it into an open world game full of content and different like weapons and builds and opportunities for players to do different things. And I certainly don't want to knock the amount of work they put into the game, because it truly is a beautiful game. Now that that's out of the way, I'm going to give you guys the whole point of this video, my opinion and my thoughts on it as a whole. So let me start at the beginning. The game starts, I'm playing it, I'm having the time of my life, I'm having a ball, I can't wait to see what's next, I love it. Boss fights are amazing, challenging, and I just can't get enough. That's all there is to it. Or at least that's what I thought, because what happened at around the 30-hour mark is fatigue started setting in for me personally. Now the reason I say fatigue started setting in for me is because the open world is kind of a double-edged sword. Now, I'm someone who's very meticulous, wants to explore everything the developers put in the game so that I can get a full experience, especially if I enjoy the game, which I was enjoying Elden Ring at this point in this story. But what had happened was, because of my full-on exploration, I also did a few sequences with my friend Isaiah Facepalms. He was in a few episodes, and I feel like I became over-leveled from exploring so much. The bosses weren't so challenging. I felt like I was breezing through the game. The combat, without the challenge of bosses, the combat doesn't hold up, in my personal opinion, as something that makes me want to come back, if that makes any sense. So around the 30-hour mark, I'd say, that's just like a rough estimate, is where I'd say that the fatigue started setting in for those reasons. Now, I'm trying to be very open-minded, because I know I did explore everything. I did quite a few bosses in co-op with my buddy, and we had to do the boss twice, which means I got more souls from doing that, or runes, sorry. And that is definitely where maybe I got a little over-leveled for that point in the game. Another reason for the fatigue that is arguably self-inflicted is the fact that I stuck with one build. I am not the type of person who likes to mix up my builds. I usually like to do a second playthrough if I enjoy the game enough with a new build. While I'm playing, I kind of choose my build, I stick to it. It's my favorite build, that's what I want to use. So even though Elden Ring has like such a variety of things that you can do and different weapons that you can use, they were locked off to someone like me who wanted to just use my favorite stuff. And without that experimentation, whether it's self-inflicted or not, the combat just isn't diverse enough, in my opinion, to make me want to keep coming back. Now, the reason I say that the combat isn't very diverse unless you switch up your build is because the way I like to play FromSoft games, which is the strength build. Speaking of FromSoft games, I want to tell you guys that I've played pretty much every FromSoft game, at least the ones I'm aware of. All the Dark Souls games. I played Demon Souls, Bloodborne, Sekiro, and unless I'm forgetting others, I also played Ninja Blade at the request of my brother years and years ago. That's a story for another time, but yes, I even played Ninja Blade. And throughout all those games, I pretty much like just sticking to one weapon or a handful of weapons that fit the build that I like. And when the strength build was an option, that is what I went with. And it suited those games very well because they're a little bit more concise. They're shorter, so the combat doesn't really become glaringly repetitive, I guess I could say. And the reason I say that it's repetitive is because if you really boil it down, you're just using invincibility frames to get through certain attacks and then punish with a quick attack. Especially, I'm talking about specifically bosses here, by the way. You get like one or two attacks in, then you back off and wait for a mistake. You can roll through, use the invincibility frames to get through, rinse, repeat. Now that sounds hypocritical because, like I was saying, action games are some of my favorites, and those are arguably the most repetitive games there are. Now, Mad World's a big example. Ninja Gaiden's another big example. I'll just stick to those two, but those games I've beaten hundreds of, maybe not hundreds of times, maybe even hundreds of times, I don't know, but I've spent hundreds of hours playing those games without a doubt, and I'm not tired of any of them, honestly. Now, I don't want to go super deep into why this might be. Maybe it's just a personal preference. Well, it's definitely a personal preference, 100%. But in Mad World, for instance, you look at it, it's just weaken your enemy, do a finisher. Grab your enemy, use an environmental takedown. You don't even have build options. There's some weapon pickups that you can do, but there's a breadth of experimentation there in the base game. The experimentation, this is the problem I have with RPGs in general, by the way, so hopefully I'm not ranting too much and you guys are still following my ideas, but if not, I'm sorry. But the base game has diversity in it, whereas RPGs, the diversity comes in the build you choose and the build path that you follow throughout the game. And me being someone who just picks one thing and sticks to it is not conducive to that style. Something like Mad World, even though I know everything on every map, I still have plenty of opportunities to experiment and find new things. And then the opposite of that is Ninja Gaiden. The diversity in Ninja Gaiden comes from massive moves lists, as well as a lot of opportunities and fast-paced combat. Even the bosses, it never feels like I'm hurt. Well, that's a lie. There are times where I feel like I'm waiting for the boss to make a mistake, but because of the pacing, I feel like I'm fighting the boss, not just waiting for an opportunity. Whereas a lot of the time in Dark Souls, which I get, hear out my whole thoughts before you say anything, because I know that's always been From Software's thing. So I'm not going to make any more comparisons. I'll just give you guys those brief little tidbits. But then from there, I'll go back to Elden Ring. And I think the problem I have with it is the reason I love Dark Souls, Demon Souls, all those games, is I didn't really love Ninja Blade so much, but again, story for another time. The reason those games I think I love so much are because even though the combat is somewhat repetitive, the sense of discovery and seeing the next boss, seeing the next area just keeps me playing. And the bosses are always so cool. And Elden Ring's no different. Again, hear me out, but they're more concise. I don't really know, I don't have an hour count. Let's just say 30 hours, because that's where I started getting fatigued with Elden Ring. Maybe around 30 hours for those games to complete them. And notice Elden Ring, about that amount of time is when I was having a lot of fun. Where Elden Ring suffers, I think, is just how daunting and massive the maps are. That's not to say that they did a bad job with the open world, because it's not like an empty open world like Mad Max. I hate to rag on Mad Max because it's one of my favorite games, but that open world is empty. It's just, you know, go here, scavenge, go there, do that. This game is completely open and free for you to explore and do what you want. And it is rather dense with stuff to do, I'm not gonna lie. But the areas are still just so massive that I spend so much time running around on the horse. I clocked in like 102 hours in total in the game when I beat it completely. And of that, what, like 42 hours, 42 to 45 hours made it into my playthrough. That means I cut out 50 plus hours of my playthrough. Now, this isn't strictly just me. Doesn't mean I was running around for 50 hours. Sometimes I cut out sections that I repeated. Maybe I did some farming to try getting a specific weapon or item. Or maybe I died and cut out loading screens and the run back to the boss. So again, that's a self-inflicted thing. This is all my opinion, not objective fact. I'm not a reviewer. I'm giving my thoughts, not reviewing the game. So the sense of discovery, every time I found a new area in Elden Ring, I wasn't super excited. I was more, especially by the end of the game, I was getting annoyed. Like, truthfully, I'm just gonna say it. I like, this whole new massive area would open up and I wouldn't feel like exploring it. But me being stubborn and wanting to see everything the developers have in store for me, I would explore it. But because I didn't want to, that's where my frustration started coming in. And hopefully it didn't ruin the playthrough too much for you guys, but I'm trying to show you where my mindset was. I just wanted to explore everything, but I didn't want to explore everything, if that makes any sense. And every time a new area opened up, it was just daunting. So in the end, I think they just bit off, not more than they can chew, because they succeeded with the open world, but they just bit off a little too much for their first attempt at an open world. I think they should have started a little smaller, personally. Just for me personally. Maybe the majority of people clearly don't agree with this, so it's just like a selfish request, I suppose. But that would be my request if I were to, you know, give input on the next game or whatever, is go back to the more linear style. I just enjoy that more. You could open it up a little bit more than the older games so that you can still have Torrent, the horse, and run around, because I love the horse combat. There's plenty of stuff Elden Ring added that I love. The stakes of Murica, so you don't have to run back to every boss. That was a real pain in the old games. And then the horse combat, like, you guys can see on my face, every time I fought a dragon on the horse, I was just having a ball. I guess if I were to really boil it down, I don't want to spend 102 hours beating a game once, personally. I can't think of any other game I've spent that much time playing just to beat once. I know that's a weird complaint to have. Oh, it's too much bang for my buck. You know, $60 for 102 hours is unheard of, especially these days. But that's just a lot for me. Like, I only want to spend 102 hours on a game if I choose to revisit it, if that makes any sense. I know that probably is like what's this guy talking about right now? You know, he wants less game. But yeah, in this case, I truly do want less game, because I loved, like, every main boss. The duplicate bosses, not so much, obviously, but the main bosses, like Godfrey, Godric, Margit, the Black Blade Malekith. There's plenty of other bosses. Even Renala was really cool. The Moon Goddess or whatever. I loved those. They were so amazing. So if it was just like 30 hours of exploration plus those bosses sprinkled here and there, and Placid Dusax, that giant dragon, was also... There's so many amazing bosses. So many. And I loved every second of those bosses. They were just too few and far between of the exploration for me. I feel like I'm repeating myself now, so I'm going to start wrapping it up. I hope I covered everything, and I also want to drive home that, again, I already said it once, but I'm going to say it again. They deserve... The game's beautiful, and it definitely deserves, from what I've seen so far this year, it definitely deserves Game of the Year, because it's beautiful. The music, the art direction, the graphics, the game, like, the game's just... It's one of a kind. It's amazing. The next thing I wanted to repeat, even though I've been repeating myself a lot already, is I'm not a reviewer. This isn't a review. These are strictly my personal gripes with the game that really held it back from being like one of my favorites. So as it stands, it's not even my favorite FromSoft game. That honor would probably go to maybe Dark Souls 3 or even Sekiro, because I loved the combat in Sekiro. That was really good stuff. So that'll do it. I'm really not sure if I covered everything or got my ideas out there clearly. I really should have written a script or something like that, but I just kind of winged it, you know. But be sure to let me know what you guys think in the comments below, both about my opinions and your thoughts on the game as a whole. Do you agree with anything I said, maybe to a lesser extent? Thank you for watching, and I hope you can somewhat kind of see where I'm coming from, even if you disagree, because I do think the game deserves what it's got. I know I have a broken record, but I just want to really drive that home, because just because I don't personally enjoy it doesn't mean I hate the game or wish any bad things about it. I'm extraordinarily glad that it's succeeding, and I wish From Software and Namco Bandai much success in the future. And even though I became fatigued with the game and have been kind of lambasting it a little bit, if they do a DLC, I'm definitely going to be there and play it. I enjoy the game, certainly enjoy the game, and respect the game enough to do that. And I just hope it's not like an expansion that's just another huge giant area for me to run around. That's all I'll say. If they do DLC, I hope it's more linear with some amazing bosses, because Elden Ring had some really amazing bosses. But thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.